Hi, Christian. How are you?
Hi, Nir. I'm very good. Very
Very
excited to be
happy.
part of the FinTech Week.
I'm happy to have you. We were trying to schedule, and now it's coming to life, and you're part of the UAE Israel FinTech Week. So welcome.
Amazing.
And
Thank you.
and you represent the DIFC, and I've been curious. A lot of people really want to understand what's the role of the DIFC. But before we dive into that, I want people to understand more about you and your background.
Perfect. Happy to give a bit of background on and answer all the questions you have, and I'm sure the audience would like to know. So maybe let's start with myself. My name is Christian Kunz. I'm the Group Head of Strategy and Innovation for the DIFC Authority. I joined that role earlier this year in April, actually the week when the pandemic hit and we had to go into lockdown. So I started working remote for the first couple of weeks. But I was engaged with the DFC already beforehand. I spent my the last 7 years with McKinsey in the region and globally. And I focused working primarily on technology and financial services. And from all the way of venture building with incumbents, digital techer wallets, digital banks, as much as setting up digital studios and transforming banks, as well as looking at fintech and fintech regulations in the region and globally. So this role kind of encompasses all of this. And that was one of the reasons I was very excited to join.
Amazing. So you're the right person to, I think we need to talk more because,
yes, please.
We had a FinTech Nation Summit in September with all these neobanks, challenger banks, payment providers that you know from all over the world. And now we've seen so much increasing demands from Israel, the UAE, Bahrain, so much going on. And the first delegations who are flying are these banks and fintechs. They are creating the path to many more. So now I want to understand, what is DIFC exactly, and what is your role as a player there?
Yeah, let me explain that to you because it's a very unique concept. So the DIFC, Dubai International Financial Center, was founded 16 years ago. And at the time, it was an unprecedented innovation because it was the first financial free zone. And what does financial free zone actually mean? It is set up under the federal law and is exempt of the civil laws and the regulations of the onshore UAE market. And therefore, we have our own legal framework based on common English law. We have our own financial regulator called the DFSA. We have our own courts. And the premise really of this concept was to bring global standards and global innovation to the region and give comfort to sort of the leading financial institutions in the world to set up. This has been quite successful. We have now over 2,700 entities based in the DFC, over 25,000 people working in the center. We contribute to over 4% of Dubai's GDP. Which is nearly 40% of the financial sector GDP of Dubai is contributed by the DFC and the entities and people working in there. We're the only global financial center if you look at the rankings. So there's some regional financial centers, but in the region, we're among the top global financial centers, and that's how we also benchmark ourselves. We have over 700 billion US dollar market size. We have over 500 financial regulated firms. And just to give a bit of perspective, the Central Bank of the UAE has 273, SAMA has 313. So it's a large number of financial institutions across banking and capital markets, wealth and asset management, insurance, reinsurance, and more also fintech. And I think we're going to talk a bit more about fintech, but we have over 200 fintech companies registered in the DIFC, which is more than 50% of the GCC fintech footprint. So we are de facto the fintech hub in the region, and it's growing very fast. Over 20 of those are now either fully regulated or are in our innovation testing license, which is a sandbox that actually leads to a license, as opposed to some other sandboxes where the exit strategy is a bit different. I think you've talked to Raja as well, who's leading our fintech hive. That was obviously one of the 3 years ago, the first accelerator where we started moving into fintech. And now we're starting to move beyond fintech to actually what we call the future of finance, and looking in how we can enable the future of finance, not just from an infrastructure point of view, not just from a license and regulatory point of view, but also from a point of view of removing friction, enabling growth through different physical and virtual capabilities. And happy to talk more about this as well. I think maybe the last thing to mention is that through this financial free zone concept, it has been really quite successful because we managed to attract 17 of the top 20 banks globally. So 17 of the top 20 banks globally are set up in the DIFC. We have over 6 of the top 10 asset managers, 4 out of the top 5 insurance firms, and so on. And as I mentioned, it was really based on bringing global standards and innovation. One example that we continue to bring to the region is, for example, earlier this year, we launched the first and only GDPR compliant data protection law. And we're in process of getting adequacy with UK and with Europe, so that data exchange, especially with fintech businesses becoming more and more important, cross-border are compliant. Another example is our money services regime, which is the first and most comprehensive one, including already from the start AISP, PISP part of arranging and advising money services, as much as providing money services, money transmission, enabling new business models. And I think that's where obviously our regulator is very important and is working very, very closely with us. And we have a very strong pipeline on more of those enabling regulations and working closely with fintechs together to enable that.
Amazing. Well, finally somebody's giving me the overview of the holistic overview of the ecosystem and the numbers and the data that I can start to understand. And a lot of these fintechs and other companies are flying to Dubai, let's say, and they want to form relationships and partnerships with these banks that you mentioned, the multinationals or the local banks. And first they need to know more. And I think this is how we can serve them today and throughout the whole week. If you can give some
Absolutely.
Some advice to companies who wants to come over there.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to come and enter the market, I think the UAE is quite a complex market for market entry. So I think it's really the first step is to find sort of a trusted source of information. We as DIFC obviously are very happy to provide that. Our FinTech Hive, myself, please feel free to reach out. It's a market with multiple regulators, financial free zones, which not everybody is used to. But also big opportunities in terms of not just fintech, but as I mentioned, we're looking at future finance, which goes to the next level of embedded fintech in ecosystems like trade finance. Dubai, obviously,
it's good you dive into
exactly.
it. Exactly. Open banking also, yeah.
Yeah. Open banking. I think we should talk about it a little bit more as well. I think obviously if you think about Dubai. Dubai obviously is very much based on trade, on doing business, on tourism, on sort of being a global hub. And I think these are also areas, and it's becoming more and more an e-commerce hub as well. These are areas of where it's worth looking into how financial services link to those different ecosystems and how you can kind of unplug those opportunities. So looking at what are you trying to do, what are the opportunities you want to expand. And then understanding if you are regulated or non-regulated. If you're a non-regulated fintech, or if you want to get started, we introduced this year. We have a innovation license that is subsidized. We have for certain fintechs also market entry licenses that make it very cost effective and cost efficient to explore the market first without spending a lot of money. And then we have obviously, if you're regulated, we have the innovation testing license I mentioned before. The November cohort is the applications are on at the moment, and we have 2 cohorts a year where startups can kind of get regulated quite quickly compared to the traditional processes. At the same time, we have the accelerator like the FinTech Hive. And we've become, since this year, also part of the Future District. And the Future District in Dubai is is a partnership, is a virtual partnership that is expanding more and more with Dubai Future Foundation and Dubai World Trade Center. And we are located next to each other, but we're working very, very closely together on innovation, and especially on innovation that goes beyond just future of finance and goes into kind of other future economies where financial services always is at the center. So I guess reach out to us to help to understand the market more, understand, what are the trusted information that you need to know to get started. If you're regulated, how you can get regulated, and how you can use sort of the Dubai Global Hub and the DIFC Global Hub to build not just a business for the UAE, but actually kind of build a business that is expanding across the region and potentially globally from here.
That's a huge, very important opportunity. So companies will look at it as a bigger window to so many other markets. And again, as I said at the beginning, these relationships with just formed, and the first delegations that I've been seeing, and I'm sure maybe you're also meeting them during these days, right? Yeah. Are the banks, the
yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have GITEX going on. There's a lot of meetings scheduled. We're starting to have meetings in person again and events, which everybody's very excited about. We also have, for example, the FinTech Hive has its current cohorts, investor days, and so on. So there's lots of opportunities to meet each other, and we're very excited to do that. And not just explain about sort of the opportunities, but really kind of also learn from each other, because we know Israel being one of the global startup and innovation and particular FinTech engines that we want to learn from as well. And I think this knowledge exchange both ways and leveraging each other's strengths, I think, is really something I'm looking forward to a lot.
So yeah, stay tuned. I mean, this is the perfect week. I mean, tomorrow we're going to have more Israeli fintechs, VCs, companies, ecosystem leaders. Of course, we also have from the UAE. We have even companies that were part of the DIFC FinTech Hive. If I remember right, DAPI, I think, was one of the success story and is a success story from the FinTech Hive, and of course others. And we also have the ADGM and all other players are also in one summit. Yeah. And this is the purpose: first, to educate. Next year, we're planning to do the FinTech Hackathon, hopefully with you and Microsoft for startups that are amazing partners. Yeah. And maybe more, ecosystem players like Hub 71 maybe and others. Because from what I've seen, there's a lot of demand also from the banks. I was talking mainly with the banks, and they're very, very interested in coming up with these programs.
Yeah. I mean, we, the FinTech Hive, and we work very closely with all the UAE, but not just UAE banks, also Saudi, Bahrain, and across the region entirely. Obviously now welcoming a lot of the Israeli banks as well, and see, what are the opportunities. We just launched also an innovation hub around the FinTech Hive. So we have something called the Gate Avenue, where we have the FinTech Hive and 2 co-working spaces. And we just recently announced that we launched the innovation hub in that space. So this is actually 30,000 square feet, where we also have now growth companies. So not just the early stage, but 10, 20, 50 people, big startups, growth companies, regional and international, that are setting up. And by January, we have over 600 people full-time working there, connecting there. And we're looking at expanding that further. So this is another space where if you really want to, meet the community, see the community, and that includes VC, as you mentioned, VC investors. It includes the growth companies. It includes the startups, the accelerators, as much as the banks, the schemes, many other corporates that are beyond in financial services, very interested in kind of shaping the future of finance. Another thing is really what we see as a strength when it comes to funding. Obviously, we have our own FinTech fund, and we're currently in process of setting up the Future District Fund with the Dubai Future Foundation. That's something very exciting, for those companies to keep an eye on and see how to get, engaged and involved in that, in this booster. And there's some programs around that as well that we will continue to drive from our side as much as from the Dubai Future Foundation side. And that's really something that's exciting. And as you know, if we look at the $400 million that was invested in the UAE in startups and venture capital last year, 380 million of this venture capital went into startups in Dubai. In fintech, it's similar, about $80 million last year invested in fintech. This year, already over 100 million by Q3. So despite the pandemic, investment into fintechs is growing. However, we see that deals are down. So it's really about focusing on what are the high impact businesses. And I think we need to see how can we still also support the early stage, the high risk, how to get more angels. And I know that the angel investor ecosystem in Israel is very strong. I think in the UAE it's emerging, but I think especially also finding ways to get funding to earlier stage startups with big potential, but maybe not yet with the traction, is something that I think I see opportunity in going forward. Similarly, one topic that's I think we are excited about is venture debt. I think it's something that is very nascent in the region, and I think it's something that we really want to make sure that it's growing, because with a lot of the businesses we see, especially in fintech, debt is a big component, and it's not easy to get access for startups and growth companies. And this is also something I'd like to see next year and potentially learn from Israel to see how have you done it.
Great. So when are you flying over? When are you here?
As soon as possible. As soon as possible.
That would be amazing. I would love to host you and make these meetings like face to face. Until then, we have a full week, really a full week, with all the players that you mentioned, the private investors, VCs, companies, startups, again, fintechs, banks, and also interviewed some neobanks in the UAE and from other parts of the world, actually, because we're also global. A lot of people are watching us and are interested in the region. How can people learn about these programs that you mentioned? Where's the best way to connect with you and your amazing team?
Yeah, so I think there's two ways, and we're working on making that even more seamless. But on our DIFC website, we have a section for innovation, and this is where you have all the links for the innovation testing license, for the accelerator, for the special subsidized commercial licenses, for the fund. There's also a website coming up soon for the future district. And then we have obviously also specific websites for each of the different topics as well. So happy to share them with you, so you can get them to the teams. Yeah, also feel free, absolutely. Also feel free just to reach out to us directly. So we'll share emails, and whoever is interested, we're always happy to help and to have those conversations. Absolutely excited about this opportunity.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Christian, this is the first time we're talking. I was talking with your team for quite a while since the previous summit, the FinTech Nation Summit. And we have big hopes and big plans to collaborate even the next year, and the hackathon and many programs for the fintechs and banks. Again, I have only good things to say about the team and everybody, and the FinTech Hive, unbelievable people and leadership. And stay tuned. I guess a lot of people want to connect with you.
Absolutely.
Great. Take care.
Thank you so much, Nir.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody.